let's move on to story number 3. This is also something that I kind of like, but it's sad. It's sad. Don't get me wrong. But Activision confirms data breach exposing employee and game info. So not only are you gamers affected, it is your employees too. They suffered this data breach in early December 2022, and hackers gained access to the company's internal systems by tricking an employee with an SMS phishing text.
Dang,
I have some spicy.
submission.
I have spicy thoughts,
I have
but
some
I'm
thoughts on it as
hearing
well.
everybody else, and then I'm gonna drop like the biggest thought that I have.
Quickly, initial thoughts on this. I know that Microsoft was looking into acquiring
Yep.
Activision.
Yep.
So I don't know if that is still just in the books.
Well, the
if that's
government
affecting
was
the
looking
decision.
at blocking that. So I believe the SEC was trying to block that acquisition.
Ooh, tell us
Interesting.
more.
I'm curious to know your thoughts on why.
Too much, too many games on one platform, and the ability for Microsoft
Monopolize.
to monopolize. Not that they would ever do that or attempt to do.
They know how good.
And it has not actually been blocked yet. But yes, they are trying to block it.
We're looking at it potentially. They're investigating.
Sure.
So this data breach is potentially.
You sound like our crypto friend. They're just investigating me.
Right. That they
I won't mention names.
This data breach is potentially highly lucrative or damaging, because if they were able to get access to source code, which I believe they were, that's the entire intellectual property of game companies. Game companies, the everything they sell is just compiled source code. And so if you can access the source code of Activision, you basically have all the wealth and value of Activision. So whenever you think of who can be most damaged by something like this, it's very much the game companies. And not only are you going to see that with clones, but you're going to see that potentially with exploits, kits, like a whole lot of stuff can come out of getting access to source code. So this is a pretty big deal. This isn't just like a normal company that gets breached. When they get breached, it's their whole value.
Right.
So I'll add 2 thoughts here. One, I think it's really interesting that right, we're finding out about this, but the employees are finding out at the exact same time. Because what I read further a little bit into this, it seemed like the employees didn't really know until the public disclosure was made. And that's always an interesting thing from a company perspective. I'm not saying they did it right or wrong, or what they had to do, but I thought that was interesting if they found out at the same time. Because right, do you treat your employees in priority and notification or not? I'm not disagreeing one way or the other, just saying that's an interesting fact. The other is, it seems like that we've seen a larger target market for these ransomware attacks and these hacks amongst the gaming industry, right? You think about like NVIDIA, right? Their entire network was taken over. You got Activision, you got some of these bigger gaming companies are being more targeted. And I think it might be more because, right, there's such a large consumer base of data there. It's an interesting trend.
Well, and they have a higher incentive to pay out. So if you ransom Activision, they have a higher incentive to pay out because all of their value is digital. It's very different than if you try to ransom Coca-Cola. Like Coca-Cola can still make Coca-Cola without computers. They started without computers. Like it's a different value, and so it's a different threat.
Right. Yeah, I just think it's an interesting point to bring up, like seeing this trend moving towards that direction.
So I also, when we saw, I want to say that Epic Games is the breach or leak that solidified it, because after Epic, we started seeing like all these companies go down, like Pac-Man, Tekken, and all these, now Activision. And I wonder if all of this is correlated, because you still have bank information, on your apps. And then you also have chats, and chats is one thing that I've really thought about, because those like Microsoft or PSP, whatever, gaming chats are very toxic places. Like you,
Back to your spicy TikTok channel.
yeah, no, it's worse than
Yes.
my TikTok channel, I promise you. But I feel like people can use that to blackmail regular players and be like, you know, like now that we know that ChatGPT is storing information, maybe people are able to download all these conversations that they're having on the group chat. So I don't know, like, I mean, those are just some scenarios that are running in my mind, which would allow people to like pay ransom.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting point, right? Like you say there's financial information there, and nobody who's on those platforms probably thinks, oh, my financial information is on this platform. I need to secure it like a financial platform. Right? Like people think I got to secure it like a bank, but
Luke,
they
you were
don't.
I was going to say, regardless of whether some hacking entity would actually leverage chat logs in some way, the fact that those chats do exist and people do either say toxic things or simply reveal, you know, aspects of their personality can increase their paranoia and increase dissatisfaction, disgruntlement among customers who hear about a breach, as opposed to if it was, you know, some sort of thing where the texts are only like, when is the item shipping? You know, very, very personally intimate texts, which can increase the emotionality of a breach.
Well, and I think to that point, once again, we see consumers being hurt. And I don't hear a single word about what's going to be done to protect the gamers, right? So, we all feel bad for the company, of course, but what about the gamers, right? And how long will the gamers be under threat for identity theft and fraud from this particular incident?